Hello everyone, welcome to the Evangelist Nick Garrett channel. I'm very excited because I have a new book coming out July 4th, 2018 called Shipwrecked in the Land of King Tobacco, the first Washington family immigrant to America. I want to answer 3 questions for you today. What's special or unique about my book? What other commercially viable books are on the market that are like mine? And what my goals are with this book. So what's special about Shipwrecked? Shipwrecked covers very commercially popular figures and events from a totally new vantage point. Only on rare occasions does a work contribute in a new way to the George Washington world. When I began writing with a desire to tell a story about George Washington, only a few days of research at Mount Vernon's amazing library revealed to me that I was way out of my league in attempting to add to that saturated market of books on George Washington. Still, I kept seeing references to a John, his great-grandfather. In voluminous texts, he got a paragraph or two at the beginning of the Washington biographies, touching on his ancestors, but that information was conflicted from author to author. Just on the surface, though, I found clues of an amazing story, scant references to shipwrecks and witch trials and the English Civil War and Bacon's Rebellion, Jamestown, Native American wars. So I began researching and realized I had my subject. So the race to digitize records in the internet age gave me access to libraries all over the world that only a decade ago would have required someone like me to have a passport and academic credentials. I began gathering records back in March of 2014, and I spent years reading books about George Washington. Regarding my characters, I made outlines and I corrected the record on his ancestors. I used the evidentiary method, primary sources, checking provenance. Let me tell you about what emerged. What emerged was the story of the first Washington family immigrant to America, his family, friends, and the people whose ancestors would change the world over subsequent centuries. John was a man embroiled in conflicts like England's Civil War, Bacon's Rebellion, the English wars against the Dutch, several Native American conflicts. He was an insider of Governor Sir William Berkeley, but somehow retained such high respect among the lower classes during a growing discontent between they and the elites that people trusted him with unchecked total power. First at the plantation level, then regionally, the entire colony, and finally in other colonies. He began all the traditions we see in subsequent Washington men and women with his breadth of public offices and the inexplicable vaunted Washington providence that seems to appear even in objective analysis. In one example, when Governor Berkeley lost his hold on power and was forced to hold popular elections after what was styled the Long Assembly, instead of ousting the elitist John Washington, colonists sent him back to the House of Burgesses with overwhelming public support. In another example, John had an entire parish of the Anglican Church named after him for the first time in Virginia, where the tradition before and after continued to name parishes by identifying markers such as rivers, streams, hills. John Washington lived during a time when the mortality rate hugged 50%, and he would feel it. He was married 3 times, and by the time he died in 1677, no less than 9 to 12 children from 8 different families lived in and around his homes. In addition to parents, mentors, wives, he also lost children, friends, brothers and sisters, many loved ones. He was directly affected by the beginning of Oliver Cromwell's interregnum, which saw his family ousted from favor. He was a witness to mass witch hunts as a child in Essex, England, and watched as the headmaster of his school, a relative of 2 women he would later successively marry, he watched as he was torn away and sent to London Tower, tortured and killed. The bubonic plague hit again during his childhood, killing 250,000 people over in Italy. John was personally impacted by the waning years of what scientists now know was the Little Ice Age. It plays into his story and the fact that they went by ship to Poland to get grain because at the time it was one of the only places where they could get grain to grow of any quality. During the Great London Fire in 1666, his import-export business was affected, and a historic hurricane that hit the colony in 1667, producing 12-foot storm surge, destroyed plantations all along the northern neck. This book is timely. America is wrestling with immigration and European colonialism in the context of social justice. During John's time, indentured servitude by England's headright system and the early days of African slavery impacted his daily life. Even during his time, he broke the conventional molds of importing only single men, then punishing them for infractions and interactions with women. John imported whole families and near equal numbers of men and women, realizing that the headright system would work if people had that vested interest of being on good land, having families to feed, settling down. When servants of his showed exceptional skill, he discharged them early and helped them establish trades in their area of specialty. Many headright servants established themselves as his neighbors and would be his lifelong friends, unlike so many sent off to the fringes of the settlement to languish. As a result, John Washington died owning almost 10,000 acres over 4 plantations spanning about 80 miles. This book is so important today because we're moving from celebrating individual elites of European descent based on well-intentioned and patriotic half-truths and heritage and American exceptionalism. This shift has left many sites across the country with brilliant young National Park Service interpreters concerned and limited on how they interpret. Sites want to tell stories and offer passionate programs that create lasting memories and inspire young people about history they can be proud of. Teachers want to teach about the people who lived and worked there, put their hands in the dirt there, and lived through real events there. John Washington and his life is a perfect model specimen with enough links to his great-grandson George to justify expansion into new generations of storytelling, archaeology, and interpretation at the various George Washington sites in the Mid-Atlantic region. Shipwrecked in the Land of King Tobacco is the completion of what Charles E. Hatch Jr. called a historical knowledge gap that existed at George Washington's national birthplace back in March of 1969. He would be proud of the book I've written in Shipwrecked. This special new material and the potential that it holds for future interpretation at various sites will hopefully be of interest, and I know that in the way it's written, my personal passion for it will certainly convey to the readers. Now let me tell you about other commercially popular books that are like mine. My book is reminiscent of A Life, George Washington's biography by Ron Chernow, Mayflower by Nathaniel Philbrick, John Adams by Dave McCullough, and 1493, Uncovering the World Columbus Discovered by Charles Mann. Further, I modeled a works-cited and a works-consulted bibliography, as I have seen another great author, Joseph Ellis, do. I numbered each paragraph, beginning again with 1 at each new chapter. Each paragraph corresponds to a section in the bibliography where works consulted and cited provide further reading and proving of what is written. This was essential because in order to put the non-fiction material about George Washington's ancestors into an interesting and fun-to-read narrative, it required reading literally hundreds of different books. I also organized it that way as a service to future researchers on anything Washington, so they know which writers from the last 230 years got ancestral information correct or incorrect, where it was written, who wrote it, why it was incorrect. And in doing so, I certainly don't number myself among the greats. As I mentioned before, I had access to information that didn't exist at the time that many of these were written. In brief, I want to share 2 examples of why Chernow and McCullough were so inspirational to me in telling my nonfiction story. In Ron Chernow's navigation of primary sources, he organizes them into actual dialogue between people. For example, if he has letters between 2 individuals, he would actually use those letters to communicate between the 2 individuals, and it made it really interesting and brought them to life. And sometimes he would write things like, "One wonders if," and I just thought that was amazing for a nonfiction work because it served the purpose of allowing me as the reader to wonder, to confirm suspicions, and bring emotional and mental imagery into the tapestry of the story without violating its nonfiction character. And like Dave McCullough in his writing in John Adams, it was not enough for me to have the names, dates, and events to build my narrative. I wanted to tell people where John Washington was, what the weather was like, where they were standing, how they did what they were doing. In other words, for every part of the narrative, who, what, when, where, why. I would play this game with myself while I was writing. I'd say, okay, I have a ship and I know it ran aground. Well, what kind of ship? A Dutch rigged ketch. I say rigged on purpose. I went down to St. Mary's City in Maryland to talk to experts where the Ark and the Dove are, and I said, what does it look like when a ketch hits a sandbar? And they were able to explain it to me. And explain to me how a ketch is simply nothing more than defining how the ship is rigged at a particular time. This gave me the ability to bring John Washington's Shipwrecked to life and tell people what they actually saw while still maintaining the nonfiction nature of the story. I rolled out a 12-foot piece of paper, and on the top half I wrote out all the days and months of the year for the 17th century. Where was John Washington? Well, this source says he was a lieutenant colonel in the militia. What did a lieutenant colonel do? Why? So I read the laws of the Burgesses and found out that every June 1st, the lieutenant colonel had to go to Jamestown and deliver current muster rolls and magazine inventories. Magazine is where they stored their region's accoutrements for self-defense. So now I knew where he was every June 1st. So then the question becomes, well, how did he get there? How far away was it? A little over 70 miles, nautical miles. How long did he stay? Who else was there with him? These questions help me to tell an authentic story. There are times we can even be sure of a real figure's emotions. For example, John's grief was visible to those closest to him after Anne's death, but there was still work to be done. Can I say that? Did he show any visible signs of grief when his wife died? I would play the opposites game in my mind. Okay, he showed no signs of grief when his wife died. Well, obviously that's absurd. The whole process allowed me to bring the Washington ancestors to life. And in doing that, we see all the character traits that we would later see developed in George Washington. So what am I doing with my book? Well, I'd like to make a partnership capable of mass distribution and marketing budgets. I've successfully self-published. In fact, I earn royalties from 2 books I wrote, Just Tell Me the Truth About Christianity and Understanding the Holy Land Crusades. I have an Amazon author page and several social media platforms with a large enough following that I'm able to make regularly reoccurring revenue off of those. With this book, though, it's too important not to get either regional or national support. I'd like to partner with sites like Pope's Creek, Ferry Farm, Mount Vernon, St. Mary's City, Jamestown, schools, universities, colleges, any NPS sites with ties to this history, including sites of important American figures whose ancestors are discussed in the book, such as the Monroes, the Lees over at Stratford Hall near where Nathaniel Pope's Cliffs Plantation stood. I would like to make money from book sales and lecturing, but I'm willing to sacrifice personal profits in exchange for negotiating partnerships with those who can help me accomplish the goal of gaining wider reach and strong mass media marketing. I'm more interested in wider distribution in lieu of greater money under the right circumstances. I have been having meetings with various groups, and it's moving forward very successfully. I will be releasing a first edition on July 4th via Amazon, so you will be able to buy the book right away. I'm not making any guarantees that it will stay on Amazon or that the format for which the book is available might not change later, so it might be a good idea to get an early copy. I would like to work with a professional media company that can schedule book tours, signings, interviews, and I'm willing to give time and attention to any of these sites, work under these leadership teams to explore and build additional interpretive programs, including the material that is presented in Shipwrecked. I want to thank you for listening. Right now you can support me on YouTube by subscribing. We have a large community of about 10,000 or more subscribers and about 750,000 views on our videos. We have a Patreon where we are right now offering a special program where if you give $20, it unlocks the book Shipwrecked in audio form. We are putting up Chapter 3 sometime in the last week of June, and we'll continue progressively from there. We're also on BitChute, Twitter, Facebook. We're a very close-knit community for a group of subscribers on the internet. and we cover material really in all range of topics. Our main thing is, we like to tell the truth. Sometimes that means revisionism. Sometimes it means supporting the mainstream narrative. We're very big about using primary sources. We're very big about provenance. We're very big about the evidentiary method in the work that we do. So for my regular subscribers listening to this, I know it sounds a little weird. I'm kind of speaking off the cuff informally, but I'm going to be using this video to email it to prospective partners. So I would appreciate your grace on the matter and just either watching it, liking it, moving on from it. And I look forward to talking to you soon. Thank you very much.